Welcome to Podkey Slopcast, where AI economics are getting weirder faster than the chips can ship. The striking number here isn't just that AI revenue is exploding, it's that revenue, margins, and GPU prices are all sprinting ahead of the physical growth rate of compute, and that forces a harder question about what is actually scarce. Start with the eye-popping claim. Anthropic's revenue reportedly grew about tenfold year over year for 3 straight years, hit around $9 billion last year, and could reach $100 to $150 billion this year. If those numbers are right, they're extraordinary. But the follow-on implication is even more important than the headline. Keeping that same curve would mean something like $1 trillion of annual revenue by the end of next year. That is where analysis matters more than awe. $1 trillion is not just more customers buying the same chatbot. It implies AI becoming much more useful, much more embedded in workflows, or much more expensive per unit of output, probably some mix of all three. The key uncertainty is whether this is durable demand for intelligence or a temporary land grab where buyers are overcommitting before the economics settle. The central tension is simple. Lab-wide compute capacity is reportedly growing around 3 times per year, while top-line revenue at leading labs is growing closer to 10 times per year. Those two curves can diverge for a while, but not by magic. If compute is the core input, then much faster revenue growth means at least one of 3 things. Margins are rising, prices are rising, or a larger share of scarce compute is being redirected from training into inference that customers pay for. That doesn't prove a bubble or prove permanence. It does tell you this is not mainly a story about Moore's law bailing everyone out. It's a pricing and allocation story. The reported margin jump is maybe the most consequential detail in the whole set of claims. Anthropic's inference margin allegedly went from roughly 40% in the middle of last year to above 80% now. If that's accurate, it means labs are getting much better at turning model output into cash relative to serving cost. That could come from technical efficiency, better product mix, stronger enterprise demand, or plain pricing power. And those explanations are not interchangeable. Efficiency gains are broadly healthy. Monopoly-style pricing power is a different story. If margins move toward 90% or higher, the strongest interpretation is that leading models are good enough and alternatives weak enough that buyers stop caring much about token cost. That's a huge claim. It would mean the market values access to top-tier intelligence almost like access to a critical platform. But we should be careful here. High margins today do not guarantee high margins later. Competition, open models, and customer pressure can all compress margins once the market standardizes. The hardware side lines up with the scarcity thesis. Spot prices for high-end GPUs are reportedly up more than 40% from the February trough, and large buyers like Google are paying about double spot for dedicated fleets. A spend number around $900 million a month on GB200 and GB300 class capacity says something important. Guaranteed access is commanding a premium because interruption is more expensive than overpaying. That's what scarce industrial input markets look like. The list price matters less than who can lock supply and who can't. So when people talk about AI getting cheaper for everyone, that may still be true at the model level in some contexts, but the underlying compute market can be getting tighter at the same time. Now to the software engineer comparison. The argument is that if a human-level engineer could run on an H100 class GPU, that GPU's annual rental price would need to exceed roughly $250,000 to match current engineer salaries, around 15 times today's spot rental economics. That framing is useful because it ties compute value to labor substitution, but it also smuggles in a major assumption that a sudden flood of AI-generated software labor would not push wages down. That assumption looks shaky. In normal labor economics, adding supply tends to reduce price, even if total output rises. The speaker's point is that AI labor could arrive at a scale and speed that historical analogies miss. So the clean version is this. AI could make compute vastly more valuable, but not one-for-one with current human salaries if those salaries themselves get repriced by abundance. The Altian-Allen effect idea is basically that a model doing the same task with less compute is economically similar to creating more compute. That matters because efficiency is not just a nice engineering metric. In a scarce market, efficiency becomes pricing power. If your model gets the answer with fewer wasted tokens or fewer reasoning steps, customers may happily pay a premium because the total bill still comes out lower. This also complicates the usual fear that cheaper models automatically commoditize the market. If one lab is consistently more compute efficient at the frontier, that lab may capture more margin, not less. One of the sharper second-order effects here is distributional. If compute stays scarce and expensive, consumer-facing AI products that feel cheap today may not stay cheap for average users. The reason isn't mysterious. When AI systems can perform high-value work, firms will outbid individuals for tokens. A company replacing expensive labor or accelerating revenue can justify much higher compute costs than a casual user asking for summaries or image edits. That points toward a market where the best AI increasingly concentrates inside large organizations and platforms, while consumers get throttled tiers, subsidized bundles, or weaker models. The threefold annual compute growth estimate rests on several moving parts, roughly 1.4 times from chip progress, 1.2 times from fab expansion, and 1.8 times from AI taking a larger share of advanced wafer supply. The logic is straightforward, and so are the ceilings. Moore's law gains are harder now. New fabs take time, and if AI is already projected to consume something like 86% of leading-edge N3 capacity by next year, there just isn't much allocation left to seize. That does not mean compute stops growing. It means the easy levers max out, maybe well before demand does. And that feeds directly into concentration. Training a frontier model is a giant, upfront fixed cost, but once paid, the capability can be sold to many users. That's a classic scale economy, much stronger than human labor markets, where every worker has to be separately trained and paid. The best supported conclusion in all of this is not that one lab wins forever, it's that constrained compute plus huge fixed costs naturally favor a small number of dominant providers, unless something structural changes. There is a speculative escape valve here: fully automated chip production, robot mining, robot fabs, and eventually much cheaper compute. It's worth keeping in mind because it changes the long-run picture, but it doesn't resolve the current bottleneck. In the time horizon discussed here, the world still looks compute-constrained, not post-scarcity. That's the real pressure test for this whole story. If intelligence demand keeps compounding faster than compute supply, pricing power and concentration probably keep rising until something breaks. Thanks for listening to Podkey Slopcast. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.